Hiya everyone, Cylon here. One of my favorite video game franchises, as well as my favorite fighting game series ever, is Super Smash Bros. There's so much to love about it, from its aesthetics, to its unique gameplay, and so many other things. But above all else, probably Smash's biggest driving point, is its roster. From 64, we had 12 characters, then Melee bumped it up to 25 characters, Brawl then toppled that number with 35 characters, Smash 4 soon trampled that with 58 characters, and Ultimate eventually towered over with 78 characters and counting. That number is already insane enough as it is, and easily the biggest roster of any fighting game franchise to date, but if you count Echoes and Pokemon Trainers Pokemon as their own characters, it bumps up to 91 characters and counting. That's mind-bogglingly insane to think about. We've gotten some insane characters choices over the years, and then there were some that people absolutely despised. But there's always one specific question that pops in people's minds, specifically mine, when a new character is revealed, or when a roster is fully complete. How would you develop your own Smash roster? A daunting task for sure, as everybody has their own ideas and wishes they immediately think of, should the question come to mind. That's why today, I've decided to make my own dream Smash roster. This will be kicking off a series I want to start on this channel named Dream Roster Maker, where I'll take a fighting game series I like, and make a roster from it, and today we're obviously starting with Super Smash Bros., so without further ado, let's begin. So, to begin, I will be using Ultimate's current roster as the base, and expanding it all the way to 85. A strange number to kinda end off on, I know, but there's a good reason for that. Well, actually, there's a few reasons for that, one of them being that in the game's files, there are 16 slots in total available for DLC fighters. As of posting this, 12 have been taken up by Piranha Plant, Fighters Pass 1, and Fighters Pass 2, making up a total of 81 characters, should you not include Echoes. I personally do believe we're not done with Smash DLC, and will continue until we hit 85, or maybe even more, but that's another topic for another day. All you peeps need to know is that 85 is our maximum to work with here. As this is my personal list, there will be some cuts, not a lot but some to make space for characters I choose. To begin everything, I'll be going over the returning characters first, and moving down the road with other ideas and concepts I have in mind with this roster. One quick thing before we start, however, please keep in mind, this is simply how I would build the roster, not how I'm saying the roster should be in actual Smash games. With that being said, let's start with the characters that started it all. If we're talking returning characters, we gotta start off with the original 12 from Smash 64. Lucky for them, everybody from there is coming back. The only character I struggled with was Jigglypuff. I can completely understand why people don't really care for her anymore, and near the beginning of roster making, I was considering cutting the character. But something felt genuinely off about leaving out this funky little fleshlight from the game. It's like that one cousin you don't really talk to but you're cool with whenever you meet up, and it'd feel weird as hell not having them at the family get-together. Next up, the Melee returners.
Peach, Bowser, Ice Climbers, Sheik, Zelda, Falco, Marth, Young Link, Ganondorf, Mewtwo, Mr. Game & Watch.
Make the return. Peach and Bowser should be pretty obvious, they're staples in the Mario franchise, and it wouldn't make any sense to ship them out of any Smash title. Ice Climbers is a debatable choice, but I'm keeping them around, simply due to fan popularity. I love these characters, and their mechanic in Smash is really unique, so I'd say that justifies them staying. Sheik, while not always in Zelda titles, is still an extremely beloved character from the series, and would leave a pretty hefty scar if removed, so she stays. Zelda is like the Peach of the Zelda series, with the added benefit of having her damn name as the series title. Of course she's coming back. Falco, the cocky pilot of Star Fox, is staying with his good buddy Fox. Marth, the main character of Shadow Dragons. Of course he's staying. I wouldn't remove a character with such a fun playstyle. Young Link and Ganondorf are returning, but I'm holding off on talking about them for now, as there's a specific section they and a few other returning characters will go under after the cuts section. Mewtwo, one of the biggest names in the Pokemon franchise, and an extreme fan favorite in Smash, is obviously going to come back into my roster. And finally, Mr. Game & Watch, an extremely important character to Nintendo as a whole, while also being another decently liked character in Smash, is returning in all of his paper-thin glory. Now, onwards to the Brawl returning characters.
Meta Knight, Hit, Wario, Snake, Ike, Pokemon Trainer, Diddy Kong, Lucas, Sonic, King DDD, Lucario, Wolf,
are all returning. Meta Knight and King DDD, two characters from the Kirby series who are just as popular as Kirby himself. Wouldn't make sense to leave Kirby by himself now, would it? Hit, a character who blew up in popularity between Brawl and Smash 4 with the success of KI Uprising, deserves to stay in the roster. Wario, a character I really don't have much attachment to, but really don't mind at the same time. I think he's pretty epic, so he stays. Snake, an out-of-the-box pick that became an instant fan favorite to the community and myself, is always welcome. Ike, a blue-haired Fire Emblem character who doesn't share a moveset with someone else, he's good to stay. Pokemon Trainer, the only character with the ability to switch characters mid-fight. I was debating on whether or not I wanted to keep this character in, but considering I do think Pokemon should have the most characters, and this character is a great showcase of how Pokemon some would work in the actual titles, he's fine to stay. Diddy Kong, Big DK's little buddy. Nothing too special there, he's fine to stay. Lucas, another fan favorite in the community, and a character I hold dear to my heart. It wouldn't feel fair at all to leave Ness by himself again, so he's good to stay. Sonic, the fastest thing alive, and another character in the Ganondorf situation, I will touch up on him later. Lucario also falls into their situation, but he's coming back. Finally, Wolf, the leader of Star Wolf. There's no reason to chop him out of the roster, so he's good. Next on the list, the returning Smash 4 characters.
Villager, Mega Man, Wii Fit Trainer, Rosalina and Luma, Little Mac, Greninja, Palutena, Dark Pit, Pac-Man, Robin, Shulk, Bowser Jr., Ryu, Cloud, Bayonetta,
are all coming back, by far the most for any of the games so far. Villager, I had no reason to not have them return. I have a close relation to Animal Crossing and I think the character was a genius addition. Mega Man is one of the biggest third parties in existence, so it was really easy to decide on him staying. Wii Fit Trainer, debatably the hardest character I thought about keeping. They were such weird choices, but I think for how unique the pick is, they can stay on my roster. Rosalina, a fine enough Mario character, she's good to stay. Little Mac falls under the later discussion situation, so he's back, but there's more to talk about with him. Greninja, arguably the most popular Pokemon right now, it makes no sense to not have him back. Palutena, a divine choice of a character who's taking her spot on my roster. Dark Pit, also returning but again, falling under the same situation with Little Mac and Sonic. Pac-Man, one of the oldest characters on the roster and also one of the biggest third parties, he's staying. Robin, a tactical mastermind of a Fire Emblem character, they're good to stay. Shulk, while from a game that personally bored me, I don't see a reason to get rid of the fella, he's too unique to throw away like that. Bowser Jr., Bowser's dickhead little son, he's fine. Ryu, Mr. Fighting Game himself. Of course he's staying on the roster. Cloud, one of the most insane picks to date for the Smash roster. I was debating about this one, as I wanted a little bit of realism with my roster, and I was wondering if Square Enix would allow Cloud to return in another Smash game, and originally I was going to take him off, along with another character on this list, but then Sephiroth came out, and that simply leads me to believe that Square is now on better terms with letting their characters in Smash, so he can stay. Last up here, Bayonetta, the legendary Umbra Witch. I'd be kinda silly cutting a character I have such a deep attachment to. Last up on the returning section, the ultimate returners.
Inkling, Ridley, Simon, Dark Samus, King K. Rool, Isabelle, Ken, Joker, Hero, Banjo and Kazooie, Terry, Violet, Min Min, Steve, Sephiroth,
are all returning in my roster. Inkling is from one of Nintendo's bigger franchises as of late, its explosion in popularity alone warrants their return to my roster. Ridley. Come on. We've been waiting for this character for so long and you think I'd drop him like that? Crazy. Simon Belmont, hailing from one of the most influential video games of all time, he's on the roster, but I've decided to make Richter into an alternate costume, since he really only had one difference as an Echo, and I want to touch on the concept of the Echoes later on, but yeah, he is back. Dark Samus is also in that touch on later situation, but I promise that's the last character in said situation, promise. King K. Rool, another one of the big three requested characters for Smash Bros., he's good to stay. Isabelle, basically the mascot of Animal Crossing at this point, wouldn't make sense to drop her out. Ken Masters, Ryu's eternal best friend and rival, and newly turned semi-clone is returning for my roster. Joker, the leader of the Phantom Thieves? I debated a little bit here as well, because I love Joker and the game he comes from, but more or less it came down to would I want to replace them with another Atlas character, since I'm pretty sure one of the biggest reasons why Joker got into Smash in the first place was because Atlas really wanted to push P5, but I decided just to keep him, as for right now, there's no better choice. Hero, from one of the most legendary RPG franchises of all time, would be a no-brainer having them stay. Banjo and Kazooie, arguably the third choice in the big three Smash characters that have been requested since Melee, should be obvious why they're both returning. Terry Bogard, a literal Chad among Chads, not only has a deep connection to me, but would be easy to get away for a new roster. Might be a bit biased, but even if I cut every other third party, except for maybe Sonic, I would have kept Terry. Byleth, the character that struck fear and discourse into many. I believe Byleth deserves a nice spot on the roster. The character is such a breath of fresh air considering the series they hail from. Min Min, a controversial character in the game right now to say the least, truly I could give less of a fuck about how annoying you find her in competitive play, I think she deserves a spot here. Steve, arguably the character that blew up the hardest when revealed, why wouldn't they come back? And finally, Sephiroth. This character changed my entire viewpoint of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest staying in the roster overall, because I wanted to consider how Square would react to potentially keeping these characters, but considering we just got Sephiroth, it leads me to assume the company is on good enough terms with Nintendo to where it'd be safe to keep this character, along with his Square Enix pals in the game and on my roster. And there you have it, all of our returning characters. Oh wait. You said I'm missing someone? The Mies? Oh, yeah sure they're here too I guess. The last two things on the list are the revamped characters and the cut characters. I will be discussing revamped characters first, then the cuts. Young Link, Ganondorf, Lucario, Sonic, Little Mac, Dark Pit, and Dark Samus are characters that I strongly believe do not deserve to have the kind of status they have in Smash. I would be fine with these characters remaining on the roster, but they either need tweaks, slight additions and takeaways from their kit, or complete overhauls. I want to go over each character quickly so we can move on. Young Link is, for all intents and purposes, a fine character, but I think the fact that there's so much potential for a character who's literally just a younger version of another character, it's extremely upsetting to see him relegated to simply a clone with slight tweaks of sorts. A huge offender in Young Link's kit is that he doesn't utilize any of the masks from Majora's Mask, which I'm almost certain that people associate Young Link with that game and what those masks can do. I'm not saying you'd have to change every single move of his, but at the very least, maybe make his specials different masks, and change his final smash to the Fierce Deity, to represent the Zelda franchise beyond what's already represented in terms of the character's movesets. Ganondorf has been pretty disrespected over the years in terms of his moveset, as most of his existence in the Smash series has been a really heavy Captain Falcon variant. Now don't take that out of context, he's obviously gotten more changes that makes him feel more like Ganondorf, but you could still do more. If there's one thing that they got right with the character, it's that he's powerful as hell, but a lot of his moveset doesn't resemble how scary the character actually can be. I think not incorporating any of his magic into his moveset is a sin. There's so much you can give this character to make him a true threat, but that's just me. Sonic is probably the character I have the biggest issue with in Smash, in terms of how his series is treated overall, but the way he plays actually makes me feel horrible. I've said this before to friends and I'll say it here, as the biggest third-party character, I'd rather have this character kicked out of Smash for good if he stays the way he is. He's not a campy character that uses his speed to run away from you the whole match, that doesn't fit his character at all. Plus it's not fun to play against at all. And it pisses me off that they've had 2 titles after Brawl to give Sonic that flair and moves he's known for in Smash, and all we got was some weak-ass split kick. Man, I'm going to make an entire revamped moveset video made on the channel soon, so I won't spend the rest of this one ranting, but this character would need to be completely overhauled in my opinion. Aside from up B and neutral B. Lucario is probably the one character here that really doesn't the most need changes, but I'd appreciate some in his moveset. I believe something like his Pokken moveset could serve him very well. I understand they didn't have much to go off of when Brawl came around, but they at the least had time to maybe change a few moves as future titles released. Not including Bone Rush in any form of his Smash moveset is quite silly if I do say so myself. Little Mac doesn't necessarily need a complete overhaul, but he definitely needs help with his air game. With a game like Smash, you literally cannot afford to have a shit air game, and Little Mac is the only character who can't perform in the air well at all. I understand that his whole gimmick is that he's strong on the ground, weak in the air, but weak to the point that he's like a fish out of water is almost upsetting. I'm not saying you have to make him some god-tier king of the skies once he's half a centimeter off the ground, but give him options or the strength to contest with other characters on the roster, and buff his recovery a bit. Dark Pit quite literally is a clone of Pit, but that doesn't really mean, to me at least, that he should be a clone in terms of Smash. I'm pretty sure me and so many others got so hyped seeing Dark Pit's render in Smash 4, with him holding his bow staff, only for it to be a pretty dick and balls final smash. With all the weapons Kid Icarus has, I feel it would only be fair to give Dark Pit his own moveset to not only make him feel different from his literal other half, but also to better show off his more edgy personality. Dark Samus is pretty much in the same boat as Dark Pit, and despite sharing the same kind of look, Dark Samus is nothing like her original counterpart. It feels somewhat insulting that Dark Samus' assist trophy was 100% more unique than how they play in Ultimate. Incorporate more Phazon, you know the things she's known for, into her kit. It makes very little sense why she would share 90% of Samus' moveset. Now to the cuts. First up is Dr. Mario. I do not like this character. Will say it now, I've never been a fan of his inclusion in Smash, and considering all the cooler Mario characters you could have added to the game, you add Mario with a fake ass PhD. Feels really lame, man's gotta go. The most I'd give him is that he could be an alternative costume to Mario, which he should have been, but I'm salty that he spent so long as his own character, so, bye bye. Piku is up next, and I feel pretty bad cutting him considering how they handled him in Ultimate, but I do feel there are simply better Gen 2 reps that can represent the franchise. Roy. One of the bigger fan favorites, but I've never liked the character as a whole. He came from a game that I didn't really like, and despite now being a semi-clone, still feels bland as hell to play. Chrome is going with him since he's an echo fighter of Roy, and I believe Awakening would have enough representation with Robin and the Lucina alt. Olimar is next on the list, and this one I thought about for a few, cause I don't hate the character, but I don't really like the Pikmin series, and feel like there are other series in Nintendo's catalog that deserve to be repped more over it. Toon Link is a character that I like, but I'm not a fan of having 3 Links, and I believe young Link has more to work with in terms of making him more unique compared to actual Link. Corrin on the other hand is a character that I despise, and I feel like I shouldn't have to explain why I want them gone, but I will anyways. They came from a pretty shit Fire Emblem game, let alone a bad game in general. The character is boring as shit in terms of personality, and the thing that makes it all worse is that by the time they were revealed, a whole section of the West didn't know who the hell this character was, unless you went out of your way to play Fates, and it left a huge sour taste for wanting Fire Emblem characters in Smash ever since. I could care less if they're unique at that point, the reasons for them being there at all are so fucking lame, on top of being a shit character from the title they come from. I wouldn't keep in a character like this for any reason at all. R.O.B is next to depart, and this is probably the least I have to say for any of the characters, but I just don't have that big an attachment to this poor little robot. Zero Suit Samus is an odd case, as I think she should fit back into the same slot as Samus instead of being her own slot, so it's not really cutting the character, because she's extremely unique. I just think she fits more under the gimmick of having Samus' suit fall apart compared to her taking up her own slot. Duck Hunt Dog, a character that I felt kinda horrible about removing, because they're decently iconic and it's hard to wanna see the pooch leave, but I did make a rule to myself that I had to cut 2 of the retro reps, and I felt that, along with R.O.B, that Dunk Hunt didn't have that much going for them. Incineroar, a character that, over time I came to enjoy in Smash due to his colorful personality, is still one I'm going to let go. There's another Pokemon from the same region that I feel deserved the spot just a bit more than him. Last on this cut list, is Piranha Plant. The addition was a funny joke at first, but now the joke has died off. I'm not really a fan of this character and wouldn't willingly put it on my roster. With all the cuts done, there's now 65 characters and 20 characters exactly to add. I think that covers absolutely everything. We can now finally move on to the new characters, and I'm going to start off with a pretty safe choice. So, who likes a good player 4? Bandana Waddle Dee is the first on my roster. Say what you will about this character, but I absolutely love him with all my black little heart. Gaining major Kirby status with the release of Return to Dreamland, he's become the player 4 of the Kirby franchise, and if I was realistically going to add any new character to Smash from there, it'd be this fluffy fucker. I can kind of understand the debate of he is just an enemy. Actually no, fuck that argument. The fact that Smash went out of its way to add a piranha plant to the game should effectively shut down that argument. Bandana Dee over the many years has become much more than simply a quote-unquote, Waddle Dee with a stick. I can see this character being somewhat floaty, not having a lot of weight to them, but having good control of the air with strong aerials. He has an entire moveset of normal setup for him, and you could pull from other abilities that Waddle Dees commonly use, like Parasol and Beam for his specials. His final smash would be one of his most iconic moves, the Megaton Punch, which would have an ever so lovely shot of cracking whatever planet he chooses to fight on. I think this little fella deserves a place on the roster as much as everybody else. That was a pretty tame pick for a spot, so why not get the bullshit blazing on this next one? Soul Bad Guy from the Guilty Gear franchise, a brand new series to Smash, and another fighting game character who happens to wear red and is based as all fuck. Despite being from a fighting game, he doesn't actually fight with his fists, or at the least he doesn't only use his fists, I should say. His main weapon of attack is a sword called the Junkyard Dog MK3, which was originally the Fire Seal, and was originally part of a bigger weapon that was called the Outrage, that was designed in 2073 by Frederick Bulsara as an anti-gear Wii. I don't think now is the best time to go over Guilty Gear lore, my apologies. Anyways, Soul would be relatively heavy, and despise using a sword, wouldn't have that much range compared to your average melee character like Terry or the Shotos. But he makes up for it by having a tension meter that would let him not only be able to cancel attacks with a command, but also allow him to use Dragon Install after the meter is built up past 2 bars and gives him a new look, improved strength, and better durability. Considering Arxis is dropping Strive soon, now would be the perfect time for me to put this funky queen reference of a character in my roster. That was pretty nice, yeah? Well, I have a question for you. Do you like Pokemon? Cause our next roster slot is being taken up by guard Evoir. Strange, I'm aware, but I said earlier that I believe Pokemon should have the most slots for characters in Smash, and what better way than to fill up the roster with all the generations? You could be asking yourself, why not choose one of the starters? Well, for one, I already have a starter taking up a spot on this list. 2. Guard Evoir is objectively the most popular Gen 3 Pokemon, for reasons that may or may not have to do with NSFW, and 3, I believe she would boast a better, more unique moveset compared to someone like Sceptile. She would be extremely floaty, and very light, being one of the lightest characters in the game, but she would excel in zoning and having one of the only methods of healing herself in her taunt, based on her Pokken dual phase taunt when you hold up. Granted, the healing is extremely limited to make sure it's not broken, but it would work out. This is my favorite Pokemon by a long shot, and if I can't get her in a real roster, then you know damn sure I'm gonna slap her into my own. So I know for the longest time, people really wanted a new Xenoblade rep added, and I completely understand. While I'm not the biggest fan of the franchise, it blew up since Shulk's inclusion, and has become beloved by many, so the want of a new character is justified. The number one choice being seen to go to is Rex from Xenoblade 2, and to that I say, nah. No hate on the game itself, but I just really can't vibe with Rex, he's a bit too annoying for me, and I think he has one of the worst designs of a video game character, next to Tidus from Final Fantasy. But you know a character from another Xenoblade game that people seem to gloss over that would be sick? Elma from Xenoblade X. Hailing from, in my opinion, the best Xenoblade game, Elma would be a really good addition with a just as good moveset to boot, as she wields dual blades and guns for projectile use, being a very fast character who's all about offense, plus you can't tell me a Skull Final Smash wouldn't be super sick to see. Elma is pretty sick if you ask me, it truly feels like she deserves a spot here. From one strong female character to another, we move to a new Legend of Zelda character. Urbosa from the Breath of the Wild. I was going to slide Skull Kid in this spot, but I had already made the decision to change up young Link's moveset to fit and represent more of what Majora's Mask is about. Urbosa, out of all the champions, I feel, is the most loved and could see the most realistic moveset for. Mipha and Rivali were also contenders, but I thought Urbosa was simply the most appealing. She could be a very strong hitting character with somewhat quick movements, and her use of lightning would help her a lot. I think for a down B, she could use a flurry rush as a counter, which is something I'm really surprised Link didn't have. If she's attacked, she'll do a dodge and unleash a flurry of sword slashes. And she would snap her fingers to summon a lightning strike at the end. Speaking of lightning, she would have a lightning meter that would make her attacks stronger and have the electric effect on foes. Urbosa felt like a perfect addition to this roster. We've gone through a good few characters, but I'm a bit determined to push this roster even further. The next character on my roster is Frisk from the extremely popular indie title, Undertale. I completely understand putting in Sans, as he's practically the face of the franchise, but I personally feel it's wrong to not include the main character from a title like this. Frisk would probably be the same weight as Ness, and be someone that's easy to knock out, but makes up for it with their gimmick, the determination meter. Over the course of a fight, the meter would fill up as you take damage, and slightly lower the more you do damage. Once it's full, you are fully determined and you get a strength and defense boost for as long as the meter has juice. Also, their specials would be all gimmicks they get from boss fights, like Metaton's Pea Shooter being neutral B, Sans Bones being a down B, and Undyne's Shield as a side B. This character is very interesting, and there's many ways you could work their moveset considering how much is in Undertale to work with. I think this character is the best fit for an indie. I want to make a moveset video on this character soon too. That was pretty cool, yeah? Well, let's dumb that down a bit. You know how I removed how many Fire Emblem characters? I may have done that to add one that I saw as pretty important to the series. Anna from Fire Emblem is our next character. The fact that no one ever seems to think of this character in Smash boggles my mind, as she's kinda like the Pikachu of her series, being in every game aside from Gaiden and Shadows of Valentia, appearing in pretty much every in the franchise. As of which version of Anna I'd choose as the default, I'd probably say the one from Heroes. Using her axe for most of her normals, and also being a mix with other Annas to use weapons like a bow and arrow and spear for specials. Her alternate costumes could also ever be other Anna costumes from every Fire Emblem game. There's so much potential with this one Fire Emblem character aside from a sword, and I'm glad Byleth could push that boundary, but I think Anna could break the mold entirely. So, I heard you like Pokemon. Glad to hear that, cause our next character is from Alola, the grass-type starter's final evolution, decidueye. I'm not gonna sit here and lie, I was pretty upset when I saw Incineroar get revealed. Seeing decidueye, arguably the most popular starter from Generation 7, get tossed to the side was pretty saddening. Nowadays I've come to enjoy Incineroar, but still I believe my preferred choice was and will always be decidueye. This character would be a mix of close-ranged attacks and long-ranged attacks, and would rely a lot on trapping the opponent and building up damage over time, as this character doesn't excel extreme in any stats, especially in speed, as it's one of the slower Pokemon from Alola. Its signature move, Spirit Shackle, would pin an opponent's shadow to the ground, keeping them stunned for a few seconds, allowing decidueye to follow up with anything it needs to gain damage. This Pokemon is one of the last few I could personally really want on a Smash roster, they were too cool to pass up putting here. Man, you know a company I really love? Capcom. They own some of the biggest IPs ever, like Mega Man, Street Fighter and Devil May Cry. You can debate that the last one isn't as big, but there's also another issue, one of them isn't in Smash at all. So let's change that. Our next character for this roster is Dante from the Devil May Cry series. Ever since one of my most requested characters, Bayonetta, dropped into Smash 4, I was always wondering when Dante would come in, because I would have loved to see them duke it out and see their personalities clash. In terms of a moveset, Dante would be pretty unique, as while he wouldn't have all of his different weapons like Bayonetta only sticks with Love is Blue, Dante's gimmick would be that he would be able to switch through his styles from Devil May Cry 3 and onward, those being Gunslinger, Swordmaster, Trickster, and Royal Guard. As for how you could change through them, I've got the slightest idea, but I wouldn't lock things like his midair dash behind his Trickster style. His main two weapons would be the Rebellion and his beautiful twin pistols, Ebony and Ivory. This character is super iconic, and became one of my favorite characters after playing DMC5, and it feels like it only makes sense to have him next to his Capcom brothers. Speaking of Capcom, we've got another one coming up. This character hails from Capcom's best-selling game and one of their best franchises, Monster Hunter. With a new promising game dropping exclusively on the Switch soon, I thought it deserving enough to put this really iconic series in my roster. One of the harder things is thinking of which Monster Hunter to use, as there's so many to choose. I think the Rise default characters work as defaults well enough, but the Rathalos armor is super iconic, so it'd be in the alternate costumes. This character would be very slow, but makes up for it by being bulky and doing pretty good damage. In terms of weapons, I decided to take a page out of Marvel vs Capcom Infinite's Monster Hunter variant, and have multiple weapons in their kit, mainly the Golem Blade, which is a great sword, for some aerials, smash attacks, and specials, the Demolition Blades, which are dual blades, for tilts, aerials and up smash, and the Icicle Bow, for neutral special and neutral air. One of the bigger things to pull for the moveset is the Wire Bug, being as how you could use it twice and work wonders as an up special. I think using it twice in Smash would be pretty cool too, and it'd have a cooldown like in Rise. I think Monster Hunter should have been in Smash for a while now, especially considering Rathalos is a boss you can fight. They're extremely unique and remind me of a less cartoony Steve with how much shit they can do. The next character is really meaningful to me, as I adore the trilogy of games she comes from, and she could even be considered Namco's crossover girl, so slapping her in here was an absolute no-brainer. Cosmos from the Xenosaga series is here. What? You don't know what Xenosaga is? I don't blame you, it's not nearly as big as its younger cousin from the Xeno series, Xenoblade. But in my opinion it's the best of the Xeno franchises, with really deep themes and awesome characters/designs, and one of, if not the most interesting character from the series is Cosmos. I highly suggest you play through the Xenosaga games and get her full story. As a character, she'd be a middleweight character with decent speed but excels in range with a long beam sword and pistols. Plus she can make her body a weapon by using the nano machines in her body parts and making them into stuff like arm swords. She can also summon some other weapons, like the F-shot, which is a giant Gatling gun, and the F-scythe, which is a giant scythe, but she would primarily use her arm sword for her melee attacks. Her final smash could be X-Buster, which is a super strong wave of many laser beams hitting the opponent at once. All of her outs could be based on the other characters of the Xenosaga games too, Xenogears included to give that game some love as well. Going again with another Namco character, I'd like you to guess what series they're from. I'll give you a sec to take a guess. Time's up. If you guessed Tekken, you're wrong. If you guessed Soul Calibur, you're way wrong. If you guessed Tales of, you are just as wrong as the Soul Calibur. Could have guessed God Eater or something, but it's okay. The next character is Klee Noah from the series of the same name. And also the character whom I immediately assumed was from Sonic based on design alone growing up. Maybe that's why I'm so fond of him. Anyways, in terms of how I think he'd play, I can see him being extremely quick on the ground, but also pretty light to make up for it, so if he's hit hard enough, that's an easy stock off the fella. One of Klee Noah's most defining features would be his command grab special, which has him shoot a shot of energy out of his ring weapon, and if it connects with an opponent, they'll be lifted above Klee Noah, and Klee Noah can do one of two things: he can either throw them in front of him, or throw them downwards. The good thing about the second option is that at higher percentages, you can grab an opponent off stage and throw them into the blast zone. Kinda sucks no one talks about Klee Noah anymore. He's such a cool Namco character who deserves more and deserves to be on this roster. No more Pokemon after this, I swear. It's the fire starter of the Galar region, the striker Pokemon, Cinderace. Cinderace was one of the bigger driving points for me taking Incineroar off of my roster, as I not only think Decidueye was a better Gen 7 choice, but Cinderace is such a better and more unique choice as a fire type that isn't Charizard. Another fast character that deals quite the punch, but has nothing to write home about in the durability department. Two unique mechanics I could see working on this character are its neutral B, Pyro Ball, and its side B, which I decided to make Flame Charge. Pyro Ball, if launched out without charging, would be similar to Mario's Fireball but goes straight and curves downward over time. If you charge it fully, you can either hold it or launch a very fast fire projectile at foes. Now that I think about it, it's not too unique, but still. Flame Charge is a move that has Cinderace launch at the opponent. If it misses, you gain nothing, but if it connects, you get a slight boost in speed for a short time. You can stack the move 3 times, until you eventually become the same speed as Zero Suit Samus, who's already the 6th fastest character in the game. Another mechanic I had in mind was overtime. As Cinderace fights, they could build a charge for overheat, their down B, which when fully charged is devastating and can KO pretty quick, but leaves Cinderace in a weakened state for a bit for a few seconds. If you use it before it's charged enough, you lose speed and power for a bit. This character would be pretty fun, and I wanted to give Galar some love on my roster. Assist trophies deconfirming characters was something I always felt never made sense truly. Yet it can definitely hurt chances, but there's nothing stopping Sakurai and his team from putting one in as a playable eventually. And despite the popularity of Waluigi, I personally don't think or see the Smash team going out of their way to add a Mario character into a roster that's bloated with Mario characters already, and especially one that's only real relevance is in spin-offs and as a meme in Smash, and neither will I. I think the assist that deserves way more love and is the next one in my roster, is Isaac from Golden Sun. I'll never understand why he hasn't made it into Smash 4 or Ultimate, but that's whatever. Isaac as a character would be pretty middle ground overall, nothing that would stand out in a huge way in terms of stats. He would mostly use magic abilities, specifically Venus, aka Earth abilities, but would have swordplay mixed in with the Gaia sword he wields. If you paid any attention to his assist trophy, you'd see that his most iconic move, promptly named move, would be his side B. A strong move that can keep distance between him and the character he's fighting against. He'd also use this move for his recovery. This character and his entire series deserves much more respect than they get. At the least I can have him here. I know I said I wasn't gonna put any more Pokemon here, but there's just one more. And that's Agumon from Poke. Wait a fucking minute. That's not a Pokemon. Anyways, Agumon from Digimon is the next character to join the roster. You may be asking yourself, Cylon, you absolute brainlet of a man, isn't Agumon from an anime? He wouldn't make sense. Well, first off, you'd be wrong. The entire series started out as Tamagotchi, which really isn't too different from, say, the Game & Watch handhelds in a way, and then Digimon went to being multimedia like Pokemon, just less heavy on video games. Second, even if he was, it's my roster, so who really cares? Funny thing is, the video game rights belong to Bandai Namco, so we technically have 4 Namco reps already. 5 Capcom characters and 4 Namco characters. Sega's looking a little lonely, aren't they? Anyways, Agumon as a fighter would be pretty light and not have any real defining features. He'd have Pepper Breath as a projectile, but for the most part there's nothing that would make him nuts. Until you get into his gimmick, the Digivolution meter. Over time as you fight, you'll fill this meter until it's reached its max, and then, Agumon would Digivolve into a Wargreymon. Wargreymon would be roughly the height of Sephiroth, not being the biggest fighter but packing a hell of a punch, while also being really fast too, though he'd still be pretty light, just not as light as Agumon. That's not to say you couldn't play the whole match as Agumon, as he on his own is a completely fine character that has many options to work with. The way to activate Digivolution would be to hold down B, and Agumon has a different down B if you just tap it, so you could theoretically just play as the little dragon fella. I know the rivalry between Pokemon and Digimon is pretty huge, so what better way to settle it than in Smash yet? Plus I really like Agumon. You wanna know one thing that's always pissed me off about Smash? The fact that we don't have a damn FPS character in Smash at all. And no, Splatoon obviously doesn't count as it's not first person. So why not include the grandfather of the first person shooter genre, in Doomguy? Seriously, it almost feels like a sin that a series as iconic as Doom hasn't seen any love in Smash. You can't tell me you haven't heard the Doom theme at least one time and not started banging your head a little bit. You could make the argument that it's too violent, but then I raise you Bayonetta. Doom as a fighter I would see being a mix of a zoner and a close-range fighter. Just like the Sonic revamp, I plan to make a full Doom moveset video soon, but his chainsaw and meat hook would definitely be a part of his moveset, along with his newly gained Crucible Energy Sword for smashes and aerials. There's something oddly charming about the funny green man who tears his way through every layer of hell to ever exist, and I felt like he belongs here. If he could join the actual Smash roster anytime soon, I think I'd lose my shit. When making the roster, I stated before I set some rules. One was that I wanted to include a PC-originated character. At first I was considering a Valve character, specifically Scout from Team Fortress 2, for how well I think he would fit into a series like Smash. But it completely crossed my mind that one of my most wanted characters in Smash ever, had also originated on the PC. Riya Muhakure from the Touhou Project series. A series that is balls to the wall insane with how frantic it can get, and I feel not translating how insane her bullet hell of a series is would be a shame. Funnily enough, this would be the first bullet hell character in Smash 2. While she is known for having a lot of projectiles, for simplicity's sake, pulling from the many Touhou fighting games would serve best for moves that aren't her specials or throws, which would be her strongest attacks. She'd be extremely light and can hover like Peach for a short period of time. While she is light, she can generally make up for it with decent to great range with her long-reaching normals and far-reaching specials. I just think she's neat, and another character I would need to receive medical attention for if she got revealed anytime soon in Ultimate. Next up is our last first-party character, and coming from an upcoming title that I'm pretty sure is in development hell. Sylux from Metroid. I was having the most trouble picking out this character compared to everybody else, as Metroid has a lot of iconic characters and villains to choose, but the final three came down to Sylux, Kraid, and Rundudes. Kraid is a good choice, but he'd have major issues in downsizing him, way more than Ridley, to the point where it'd feel dysfunctional to work with. Rundudes is really cool, but I wanted to put in a character who was still alive. So Sylux was the prime candidate. Considering he's rumored to be the main villain for obviously smooth in development title Metroid Prime 4, I think his inclusion as another villain is completely justified. He'd be in the middle of the weight class, with pretty average stats overall. While I'm not 100% sure on his normals and smashes, I know for a fact his shock coil and lockjaw form have to be his specials. The shock coil would shoot mass amounts of electricity at the opponent that lasts the longer you hold it, and the down B, lockjaw, would have Sylux go into a ball-like form, like Samus, but instead of popping out one explosive, it would pop out a tripwire that will stun an opponent on hit. Nothing wrong with more Metroid love, am I right? We're at the penultimate character now, and this is a character I'm 100% convinced should have been in Smash for years now, just about as deserving as Sonic. Crash Bandicoot, hailing from the series of the same name. Seriously, this character and his series are too iconic not to have in a Smash game. Oh well, at least he's here. Krashen is all-around character, having decent stats and just about everything a character would need, like a projectile, and a pretty standard recovery. His iconic spin would have to be his neutral B, and mashing the B button while doing so would turn it into the even faster and more powerful Death Tornado. This move would even have hovering properties in the air like Luigi's down B. His down B could be the Wumpa Rocket, where he will pull out a rocket, take aim by going up or down, and shooting out a limited amount of Wumpa fruit before having to reload. As an added benefit, his sister Coco would be an alternate costume. There's tons you could do with a character who's had as much history as Crash, just don't touch anything from Mind Over Mutant. Finally, the last character on my roster. This is another third-party character, and I thought, why not end this list off with another character from my favorite franchise, Sonic the Hedgehog? I was debating on whether or not to include another, but considering I think the series is treated pretty poorly, why not give it more love, as it's arguably the most popular third-party franchise in Smash. As for which said Sonic character it would be, I had three options: Eggman, Tails, and Shadow. Shadow is arguably the most requested of the three in Smash debates, and is a super popular choice, but I really wanted to pick someone who's deeper into the series history, so I went to the other two. Eggman and Tails are about as Sonic as you can get aside from Sonic himself, both encapsulate so much of what the series is known for, and are still consistent characters in games to this day. Tails is Sonic's right-hand man and best friend, while Eggman is the arch-nemesis to Sonic and has been there since it all started. Though it was hard, I decided to choose Eggman as the final character for this roster. A character as old as Sonic himself, and is the second most iconic villain in a video game series ever. For his moveset, I decided to stick him in his original egg mobile that would be able to transform into other egg machines of the type instead of just the Egg Walker from SA2, as there would be more potential for a moveset there in my eyes. To get one very iconic move out of the way, his iconic Wrecking Ball from Sonic 1 would be his down air. It would swing down as a massive damage spike, but be really slow, so you'd have to set up for it. Eggman would have a good mix of everything in his arsenal, along with being heavy, but also being decently fast like Bowser. If there's any character I think deserves to be in Smash right now, truly, it's Eggman. Mans is an important gaming icon that deserves to stand with the rest. And with that out of the way, we have officially reached the end of the roster, hitting a total of 85 characters. That sure was fun to go through. This video took quite a while to make, but I had fun every step of the way making it. Smash is an important series to me and I thought I'd have some fun and talk about it. Who would you have put in or taken out of your roster? Let me know in the comments. I hope you all enjoyed watching this as much as I did making it. If you liked this video, drop a like and a sub to show some support, and share with a friend or two. Have a good day friends.